Hi there. Welcome to Stand Up and Redo. This is a soulful, heartfelt podcast from me, Petra Demuse, a woman over 50 who has lived life and made mistakes and learned to stand up and redo, to try something new. And overall, that's what we encourage you to do. And today we are interviewing Jen Killilea. She's a financial advisor. She works with Johnson Brunetti in Boston. And she is more than 20 years in the industry, specializing in retirement planning, and is dedicated to delivering personalized and comprehensive financial advice to clients. Holding the Series 65 license, she takes pride in understanding each individual's unique needs and creating customized retirement plans to help them achieve their goals. Jen also presents at Johnson Brunetti's Women Only Workshops, where she creates a space specifically for women's financial education. Jen and her husband, Frank, are parents of three daughters and enjoy family ski trips together. She is an active board member of 100 Women Who Care, Boston's North, as well as Life Goes On After TBI. So I am so excited to share with you this interview with Jen. She is a brilliant woman, and this interview is so helpful for you if you're over 50, and actually women that are under 50 who are going to be 50 someday and planning for their retirement, as well as anyone with financial planning, but mostly geared towards women. And welcome, Jen Killilea. Jen, welcome to Stand Up and Redo. And I would love for you to start off by telling us maybe what you're thinking to do or change in your life for 2026.
Oh boy, what a topic. Well, I am so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Petra. And I love your demographic in terms of your focus on your listeners because I feel like this is a unique group, 50 plus. There's lots of fun
Mm.
topics. And to ask me, I fit that demographic. So, what am I focusing on for 2026 to start with? Well, it's funny. I just listened to a Huberman Labs podcast, Andrew Huberman, and it was all about goal setting. I love that podcast. Sometimes I have to like be in the mental frame of mind to log in and I don't have a strong science background, but I'm able to get the gist of what the topics are without all the technical detail. But this one was did have all that science behind it, but it kind of hit home. And it was just how to set goals and how to accomplish them. And we've all heard about the vision board and, acting like it already happened. And he talked about that being sort of a good place to start. But also, what's motivating is to think about, for instance, if you don't hit your goals, and that's more motivating. So, which isn't how I think about goal setting, how most people don't think about it. And it kind of can tie into our conversation today because, we
Yes.
talk about saving for retirement.
Hmm.
Save that's one of your goals. Well, it's pretty frightening if you think about not saving, right? Like, what's going to happen if you don't
Hmm.
save? You always have to work. You don't have choices. But then you break it down and you measure it. It's really important to kind of have check-ins rather than just having a lofty goal for the year. Well, how do you measure it? And we do this with our clients instinctively as we sit down for our quarterly reviews. We measure success. Part of it is the market, part of it is what clients are able to contribute to their accounts. And most importantly is what their goals are because everybody has different goals. So I would
Hmm.
recommend that. I thought it was a great podcast to kind of kick off the year. And as I sit and think
Nice.
about what my goals are for the year, I have business goals, I have personal goals. So, in terms of personal goals, I think it's probably I want to get back to playing tennis. Did too much work this last couple of years and I've put my racket down. And not that I'm this
Mm.
awesome tennis player, but I just enjoy it. It's fun. And it's nice to get text from friends that have been like, hey, are we going to see you back on the court? It's just a nice social sport. So that's my
Yes,
personal
that's
goal
true,
to
and
get
then
that.
yes, and think about tennis, you're getting that workout, but then you get that, like you said, that connection with your friends, that's so crucial. I think that through it all, we tend to forget about how important friendships are. I'm
Yeah. So it's
excited
about
to
the
ask
balance.
you. Yes. You're right, and I am so excited to ask you after I ask you a bunch of other questions, well, not a bunch, but
Okay.
the very end of the at the very end of the podcast, I wanna round back to thinking about the new year and ask you maybe what one thing, the most important thing for a person, a woman over 50 would be to do in 2026 with her finances, but I wanna
Mhm.
wait till the end. We need some suspense. But I wanna ask you now, I just wanna ask you to share your story. I loved hearing your childhood story in another interview, and I would just love to hear how your childhood led you into where you are now. And you can make it either a short story or a long story, but I really love the
Well
story about your mom and raising the children the way that she did. If you could share that.
well, we do retirement planning here at Johnson Brunetti, and so it's always important, like, how did I get into this space? Do you go to school and think, "Well, I'm gonna be a financial planner?" Being one of 5 children, so I am one of 5, and my mom had 5 children in 6.5 years, and so I couldn't really appreciate the math on that until I started having my own children. I have 3
Hmm.
girls, and they're spread coincidentally 28 months apart. How perfectly is that? In my mom's case, she was an only child, and she had a plan just to have a lot of kids because that generation, maybe your grandparents' generation, or your listeners, if they think back to their grandparents, the family always took care of each other. Everybody stayed in the home. If somebody got sick as they aged, had health issues, typically the family would rally and they wouldn't go to an assisted living or hire people to come in and take care of them. I mean, maybe they would, but just in general, the burden fell on the family. And in my mother's situation, my grandmother on my mom's side had rheumatoid arthritis, and back then the medicine really wasn't as great as it is today. And so at an early age in her 40s, actually, I guess my grandmother was first diagnosed in her 40s, but she had my
Hmm.
mom late in life, as it would go. So my grandmother ended up, when my mom was only 19 years old, was struck with arthritis to the point where she was in a wheelchair and legally blind. And as an only child, that put a lot of responsibility on my mom. And it was only my mom. There wasn't siblings to help with that care. And it wasn't a situation where back then you just, oh, there's this assisted living down the street. So
Mm-mm.
my mom helped out quite a bit. So I think my mom was, because of that, her experience of caretaking, she wanted to have a lot of children. And so she did that. And then when the youngest was still in diapers, she filed for divorce. And it was just, I'd say, the movie Irreconcilable Differences would probably
Uh,
be it. My dad's a great guy, 9 years older. So he was further in his career. He was an acoustic engineer with Raytheon. So he was older. And here my mom is, just with a lot of kids, but no real plan. So as divorces go, it took about 10 years to settle. And why that's important, she was married over 10 years. And the reason why that's a big deal is we talk about retirement planning. It helped with their social security benefits, et cetera, because you can put a claim on your ex-spouse's social security benefits. So for all those reasons, it kind of worked out for my mom because as she aged, she had 5 kids to take care of her. But from a financial standpoint, she really wasn't in great shape financially. Even though her mom, my grandmother, she came from the generation where she never spent a penny crooked. She went through the depression. Her
mhm,
view of money was, her social security check came in, she gave my mom a little bit for rent, paid us our allowance because she kind of took care of us even though, she had some health issues. She ran that house with an iron
yeah,
fist when my mom went off to work, but she
mhm,
saved. She was a saver, a chronic saver. So I had the dichotomy of learning all sorts of great skills from my grandmother about the
mm,
importance of saving, and not necessarily investing because she was a passport saving, go to the bank and save in savings accounts. But in my mom's situation, she got lump sum from the divorce. And I saw how I don't want to say irresponsible, but it did seem it in hindsight. But she really just didn't have guidance. She had no one helping her decide what a good investment was, other than a couple of boyfriends that she dated. Before you know it,
mhm,
that little nest egg that she had really wasn't available. So fast forward, here I am getting graduating college and going into, and I went to work for John Hancock, the first company that I went to work for, because I was drawn to financial planning. I was at an early age helping my grandmother balance the checkbook, and for my mother
Yeah.
because my mother didn't do it. She didn't do it. My dad had the skill set for taking care of the money. So when the lights went off, we would look for the electric bill, and to pay it, that kind of thing. She just was horrible with
Yeah.
that. So I was helping fill out the financial aid forms, helping balance the checkbook, pay the bills, really since middle school. That was my
Wow.
responsibility. And, so with my grandmother's help, of course. But so it wasn't a big surprise that I kind of went this route because I felt like I got an early exposure. Really, I owe
Mhm.
it through my grandmother for basic good saving habits. So, yeah, that's how I ended up in this business.
Wow, that's a neat story. I love that. It is neat how hearing it's almost the generations like swap, your grandmother, then your mother was a little bit more carefree, and then you came back to you to be more responsible again. Because you had to
Yeah,
pick up and learn a lot about that responsibility, and I know for me, I was on a tight budget. I was a single mom too, like she was, and when I started
yeah,
off, I was single when my children were in grade school, the 3 of them, and it was really about just paying the bills, like you just said, "How much do we have for the electric?" So for me to start saving in my 20s and early 30s was very hard, so I started later with having, like, that 401k. I didn't even think about 1K right off the bat because I was just trying to struggle to pay the bills, and I wish that I
get the
had
bills
started
paid.
that in my young 20s. Yeah, I was trying to get the bills paid. If I had even just taken a tiny bit out more to save at that young age, it would have been I'm sure it would have benefited me greatly, but I was waiting until I was able to make a little bit more money as I aged and was able to get a job where I could be like in a higher level position where I could leave the kids a little longer. Because when they were little, it's another thing, you don't even have the benefit to maybe work overtime because you have to be home with them. So as you age, it's
Right.
different, as you know. So what I wanted
Yeah.
so with Johnson Brunetti, how do you help women who are over 50 to decide how they're going to use their finances?
Yeah. Well, here at Johnson Brunetti, all we do is retirement planning. So our clients
Mhm.
are either pre retirees or retirees. And
Mhm.
their concerns are different from somebody in their 20s and 30s or maybe even 40s as they're well into their career getting established. You're not really thinking about retiring at that point. But the concerns that folks have as they get closer to retirement is they look at what they have and it's really important that they don't lose what they have, right? But they want to grow what they have, right? So it's kind of, and it gets scary and probably the biggest mistake we see is people not having a more of a balanced approach to the topic of retirement planning.
Mhm.
And the biggest risk to people's portfolios that we see inevitably is people think the strategy that got them there, maybe they were good savers and they put money away in their 401ks or IRAs or SEPs, depending on who they work for, whatever the plan is called, but they put money away and the market's been generous. So anybody getting ready to retire now, boy, oh boy, they've had back to back decades of record performance in the markets. I mean, we've
Mhm.
never had that before. So I don't want to say spoiled, but they also remember 2008. So they know what goes up doesn't always go up, but you can
Mhm.
kind of get complacent with good returns, sort of expecting double digit returns year after year. Now, of course,
Mhm.
2022 was a tough year, but in general, the market's been very good. So what we see as the biggest risk is maybe too much market exposure getting too close to retirement. That's probably the main
Mhm.
thing we see. And we think it's more of a balanced approach, meaning some of your money in income producing investments, potentially like
Mhm.
dividend producing stocks, whatever that might be. Income is a piece of their retirement and safety. Our definition of safety is not bonds like your 401ks will say, oh, let's just put you more in bonds. Our definition of
Mhm.
safety is you can't you're probably not going to make as
Mhm.
much money, but our definition is you can't lose money. And that's a key component to a balanced approach. And the third
Mhm.
component is risk appropriate market exposure, actively managed is what we do. So I think it's a combination and the biggest mistake is either people are all safe, therefore they just may not have enough to get through the bump with inflation because as things go up in price, if you don't have investments that can keep pace with inflation, either you have to have a lot of money, which would be great and you can be
Mhm.
100% safe. But if you don't have a lot of money, you do need some market exposure to help you over the hump for inflation. So it's more of a balanced approach, not having all your eggs in the same basket.
Nice. And I wanted to round back. You said pre-retirement and retirement is what you focus on. What age would a pre-retirement be, or how many years before that retirement is pre-retirement?
Well, it wouldn't be an age because actually sometimes I'm lucky enough to sit down with 40-year-olds that have a plan that
Mm,
they're ready to retire at like 50, 52. It's not common. It's not common, but chronic saver. And these are people, maybe not with these crazy salaries, but these are people that are excellent savers and have their
mhm,
expenses super low. But
mhm.
typically they're not punching out in their 50s. So your question was, what is pre-retiree? When should you start thinking about it? And we talk to folks anywhere from 5 to 10 years out from
'Kay.
retirement or folks that never plan. We have plenty of clients that never plan on retiring that are clients because
Mhm.
they have other they worry about. So we're a full service firm, so we're talking about making sure that their estates are set up correctly, legacy planning, not only
Mhm.
they have wills, trust planning, especially in the state of Massachusetts where the inheritance, the estate tax is minimal. So, estates are
Okay.
taxed as well. So, it's all these kind of additional planning pieces that are important other than the rates of return that you get on your investments. So there's more of a
Mhm.
comprehensive uh, you know, that's what folks are worried about as they age.
That's interesting that you talk about that trust planning. I'm 55 and I hope to retire. I mean, I actually enjoy working a lot. I might, you know, I think of myself retiring at, mid 60s, hopefully, unless some fortune fell upon me and I could retire earlier.
Yeah.
But that's my goal. So I guess now I would start really like the planning. I'm pre retirement when I really think about it right now. So this
Yeah,
is
and you'd be
perfect
a great
for.
example. You're 10 years out from your goal, and that's the
Mhm,
conversation, it's goal setting. So one of the questions we would ask when we'd first start talking to a client, maybe at your age level, would have a conversation of what you're spending. Because what are your expenses and what do you expect your expenses to be in retirement? For instance, some folks may sell their home and downsize, and then there might be some more equity there. Or in most cases, it's a collateral. So even if they have built up equity, they may sell it. And with the equity they have, they probably can't really, they can buy lesser of a property, but maybe they don't have a lot of extra cash left over unless they
yeah,
leave the Northeast, right? The Northeast is you can count on for being expensive for real estate. But so that's one thing. We talk about goal planning and what they're spending. So somebody's spending 8,000 a month, their retirement plan would look different from somebody spending 18,000 a month, which some people do.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
really, people are always saying, "How much do I need?" Well, my next question is, "How much do you spend?" And we start with what you spend now. We start with what you're spending now because that most people don't wanna go to on a budget in retirement. We start with, can you afford your
mhm.
current lifestyle? That's probably a good starting point. And if you can't, then that's good to know 10 years out because what kind of changes can you make to lifestyle? Or do you push the date and work a couple extra years? Or do you really get a handle on your spending? And there's some spending that you're just spending because you just don't have the time to like figure out your streaming
How to
services or
save.
your cell phone.
Mhm.
I mean, there's money that sneaks out every checkbook, I'm sure.
But
While
I
you don't
like
need to
I like the way
micromanage
you
it.
make. Yes. Yeah, because you're making it sound like, okay, this is the reality. Your reality is you either have to change things now or change things in the future. So if you change it a little now, it might help you to not have such a drastic change in the future if you don't have that money to live that lifestyle.
And most
Yeah.
people, yeah. Most people we talk to actually they it's hard for them to figure out how much they need.
Mhm.
Most people are okay. They underestimate their safety. Most people we see, for the most part, tend to be good savers anyway, because that's why they're approaching and having the conversation.
Mhm.
And they're pleasantly surprised. I'm like, hey, you might be able to retire at 60 if you want. And they won't. They won't.
Mhm.
But it's good to
Mhm.
know they could.
Yes.
It just helps alleviate some of the concern.
Yes. Great. I have a question. If you could go back and tell your younger mom when she first was starting her working career, what to do at that young age, and even actually, if I can go back a little bit further, when she was married to your dad, maybe was she not working then?
Correct.
So if you could go back and say a woman has chosen not to work, or even I guess a man has chosen not to
Right.
work and they're living to take care of the children for that time period. Is there something that they could do, the spouse that's not working, to think about their future financially?
Well, I think it's important to try. I know you're doing so much. In my mother's situation, caring for 5 kids, plus her mom, like, was living with us, right?
Mhm,
So her and my grandmother's living with us. I mean, it's easy for me to say, "Hey, why don't you take over the finances too?" I mean, that's a huge
mhm,
job. But understanding the expenses and the income. Now, even if you're not the person that has the time because you're taking care of the family or really might not have the
mhm,
interest, do check-ins. I think it's really important with your partner to just check in with each other annually, if not more than that, on how much income is coming into the household and
mhm,
how much are we spending. And I say a
mhm.
minimum annually. I don't think that's enough. I mean, certainly around tax time is a good time to kinda regroup and say, "Okay, this is," and I most couples do this, but they don't take the extra step to really understand their spending. And so that's the other key piece.
I'm surprised how many women. It always shocked me because I was very, even when I was married, my ex-husband was a fisherman when the kids were little, and even though he made much more money than I did, I made very little money to help with the bills at first until things kinda shifted. But, I was always like you just said, it's interesting that you say to have your finger on the pulse of the finances, because we would do something where sometimes he would get really burdened with working so much that I would sit down. We had a desk. In the old days, you actually had desks. Remember where you had your checkbook in the desk and all the
Yeah,
bills piled? You actually had a big surface space. I would manage the finances for a couple months and pay the bills. And then we would take turns and he would switch and he would manage them. And we'd always talk about it just because it was so hard for both of us to be paying the bills. So I'd be like, okay, well, I'll give you a break and I'll do it for a couple months. Now you do it for a couple months. And it did. It kept me aware of what exactly was happening with the finances. And I remember thinking sometimes when he was doing the bills, well, where's all the money going? And then when you actually get your hands on it and you see, you're like, wow, we could actually cut that electric bill down by $30 if we do this. And it makes you more aware that when you see the fluctuations, that you can be more helpful with even saving the money for the whole family in the general, because you know what's going on with
right,
it. So
right.
that's a great bit of advice you just shared for young people just starting off maybe. And then and if you could go back, like you said, with your mom being aware when she was with your dad, but then when she was alone and working, tip would you give her then at that point?
Oh, I would say open your mail. I just have these memories of her mail piled up. She didn't open it,
Mhm,
and it's like, "What? How do you manage a house?" She just never had the skill set. She went from living with her
mhm,
mom, who was very good at all that, to being married and having my
mhm,
dad do it. She just I don't know why she just, put her head in the sand. So that
mhm.
I mean, I think extreme because here I've met so many accomplished women that have gone through divorce with young children, and I just applaud them because that's not the common my mom was not the common divorcee. Most women figure it out without,
Yeah,
they go in with a man. So that
yeah.
was an extreme I think my mom's an extreme example, but that's kinda led me in this role because I could fill out the financial aid forms. I knew how to pay the electric bill. I knew how to I mean, I did everything. So I didn't mind doing it. I sort of found it interesting and learning it,
Mhm.
and I had my grandmother helping, and my mother was super happy to be hands off, so it kind of worked out in the
Yeah.
long run
Thank
for her.
goodness you had your grandmother. And you. You're a
Yes.
strong woman who really helped your mom. Sounds great.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of advice, and I don't wanna, like, take up the interview, but I just wanna
Sure.
share this because as a young woman, I had 3 kids for a while, and I was alone with the 3 kids. And we used to have I was a lat they were latchkey kids, so I'd come home, all the lights would be on, TVs would be on that didn't need to be on, and I used to hang the electric bill on the wall every month. Talk about opening your mail. I had to open the mail to see the electric bill. So I'd open my mail, hang it up. And I would tell the kids, okay, look, the electric bill is $130. If we can get it down to 100, if we can get this down to 100, we're going to go out to the Mexican restaurant next month. And it sounds like such a silly thing, but to include even your children at that young age in seeing that electric bill, looking at it, and then the neat thing is the reward that you can see if you put effort into being responsible with money by turning the TV off, turning that. And that goes for anything, right? It goes for like maybe turning the heat down at night, wearing a
I
robe.
love that.
It's just for the gas. But that my children were very involved in our finances when they were little kids, and they were rewarded with the Mexican restaurant.
I love the
And we
reward. I love the reward piece. That's a
yeah.
great story. Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
and
I
it was
love
fun,
that.
and I had to share that as a young mother with 3 kids and feeling stressed out because I could never afford anything and feeling like we together as a family could have a little treat, but I appreciate all of your answers to all of my questions and all of your advice. If and are you able to hear me right now? Because somehow I ended up playing.
Yeah,
You can hear me? Okay, good. But I had just wanted to ask you 2 more questions. The
sure.
one question is, first, do you have any pearls of wisdom or anything else that you wanna share about finances?
Well, given your audience, I think it's sort of interesting. I talk about this because I do a lot of women only seminars. The divorce rate, we've always heard, oh, it's 50-50, but the average divorce rate in this country is actually going down. But for folks 50 years and older, it's doubling. And for 65 and older, it's tripling. And so it's
What?
just sort of an interesting demographic. And so,
Mhm.
so for women in particular, I think it's really important because for different reasons, they take gaps. Maybe it's for childcare or maybe taking care of a parent, but they take gaps in their careers, which would impact their savings. And to begin with, they're earning less than men in general. Like typically, studies range from 82 to 85% less than men in different careers. And so when you couple the fact they're not earning as much and sometimes their gaps reduce their lifetime savings, which reduces their social security because they're not paying into it. And also their employer contributions toward their savings. So they get hit in a couple of different fronts. So at the end of the day, their nest eggs may not be as big. And so
Mhm.
and in fact, I'm starting to see more of a trend, and I just had a new client that came on, and she had to pay her husband out, and it's not uncommon now as these women get divorced that have been successful that are filing for divorce, where they end up having to pay their husband out. I wonder if we
Mm.
just dropped. I think we might have. Are you
Oh,
still there, Petra?
did we? I can hear
Okay,
you.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. You just dropped on my end. But anyway, my point is, it's interesting that there's this gap potentially in
Mhm.
earnings or in savings, but we're seeing women sometimes being the breadwinner having to pay out, in the state of Massachusetts, it's a 50-50 state. So you kind of divide up the assets. And oftentimes women are giving a big chunk of their retirement savings in their nest egg to their ex-spouse.
Mm,
It doesn't just work in one direction. Women tend to be better investors. They tend to be more conservative and they outperform men. There's study
mm,
after study, multiple studies that show that women investors often outperform men over time because they trade more less frequently. They stick to more of a long-term strategy. They
mm,
avoid the emotional or reactive decisions, which you would think would be just the
mhm.
opposite, but that's not true. Yeah, so it's sort
That
of
is
interesting
interesting.
if you look at the studies behind women in investing, it surprises most people.
Mhm. Hmm. It does kinda make
Yeah.
sense, though. And then my last question is for 2026, if you could give women over 50 that one bit of advice, and I do love what you've said so far, and I've retained that, but if
Okay.
you could give us one more bit of advice or something that you wanna even focus more on again for 2026 for women over 50.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk to somebody to help them through this. People think that, oh, I just have the money saved and I'm going to be okay. And I think it's important to reach out to a professional and talk to a financial planner because there's a lot that we bring to the table other than just the pure investment management, which is a big piece of it. But oftentimes they're faced
Mhm.
with really big decisions like when to take Social Security, or maybe they're lucky enough to have a pension decision. And they make these decisions that are binding, and getting some numbers run behind it or second opinions on different ways to sort of think about it, I think it could be helpful as they start to navigate this next phase of life in retirement. And we're happy to help anybody that's looking for a conversation.
I love that, what you just shared, because that is so crucial. You are so right about that. We think we know everything and we think we've read it all and we've learned it all, and we haven't. And you just have like, you're the financial advisor, so you have the knowledge and the skill set to help us, which is wonderful. So I really
You know what
appreciate
you
the
know. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah, that's
mm-mm,
we kind of have a
mm-mm.
saying. You think about that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true, and, that's great, so well, I loved our conversation, and I loved all of the
Yeah.
information that you shared for us and for me. I'm excited, I already have things going working in my brain about how I wanna look at my finances, talk to someone again. I had to
Good.
talk to someone a couple years ago, but things have even changed in that interim, so talk to someone again for me, and also for me, I'm taking my stand up and redo is that I'm going to look ahead at being more safe with my money and deciding how I'm going to choose different investment opportunities that maybe save my money as I age. So,
Yeah,
as I'm
and it's
getting
not
closer to
all
that
of it,
10-year
Dave, just
retirement.
a portion of it. A portion of it, right?
Yes.
Just have some of it, not all in the
Yes.
market. That's probably the biggest thing we see. So, yeah.
Mhm. And then is there anything that you can't you feel like you want to stand up and redo moving forward that you'll do differently?
As it relates to
Anything that you want to share?
anything, to stand up and redo.
How you would do things differently moving forward.
I kinda look back, and I say this with all sincerity, I tend maybe I look forward too much, and I should look back and reflect. I mean, little things like regrets. I talked about tennis, that's a big one for me. I know I mentioned it earlier, but
Mhm,
I'd say, I've been sometimes you can get so caught up and busy with whether it's work or something, you kinda let
mhm,
your fun time, that's the and I think it needs to be a bigger part of it, so, and I use that as an example because I probably took a 2-year hiatus, which is too
mhm.
long, and so I played
Yes.
so much tennis. People are like, "You haven't played
Mhm.
in 2 years?" And so I'd say, moderation, I think, is the key,
Good.
and so that's probably the big thing. Yeah.
This is gonna be a good tennis year for you. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so
that's
much,
right. Awesome.
and, thank
Awesome.
thank you. Yes, and thank you everyone for joining us on Stand Up and Redo. It was wonderful to have you here, and I thank Jen Killilea from Johnson Brunetti, and seek out some advice from Johnson Brunetti. They're in the Boston area and elsewhere, I'm sure. So reach out and take care, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Futura, have a great day. Take care.